really thought of today's sponsor, but we'll go from there. Welcome to the Untitled podcast. Leave your egos at the door. Happy to have you here today. And just to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by water. Drink some. Today I have a special guest, Stan Roche. Stan is an incredible man. He is a war veteran, and he, on top of being a war veteran, he's a decorated war veteran, served our country, and he continues to serve our community here in Troy, Missouri, and the surrounding St. Louis area. Stan and I actually Stan's wife, Terry, is an awesome lady, but when she has something in mind, she really does not let it go. It's like a dog with a bone. And I don't mean that in any sort of pejorative way at all or any sort of negative way, but she is a very driven woman. And about, I don't know, what would you say, Stan, like 6 months ago?
Yeah, it's been about that. Yeah, 6 months. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about 6 months ago, Terry told me, she goes, you need to hang out with Stan. And I had been putting it off. And look, we had hung out together before, and I get along with Stan great. But at the time, I was looking for mentorship. And I know that I talked with Jesse on the last episode, and we talked a little bit about his mentorship of me. But I believe that there is multiple levels of mentorship, and everyone needs 3 levels of accountability. Peer accountability, someone who's just ahead of you, and someone pretty far down the line by comparison to where you are, so that you can get multiple levels of insight into your life. And I was looking for somebody who was about double my age, and I found Stan. And I'm thankful for Terry's persistence, but at the same time, I kept putting it off. And then one day we decided to get coffee together, and we realized how many connections we had in such a short meeting that it just kicked off. We've been meeting now for the last few months on Tuesdays. And I was telling him, hey, it would be fun to do a podcast together and just record these conversations, whether it just be for us or anything in general. And so I'm hoping that this becomes a regular thing on the podcast, a story time with Stan or whatever we want to call this little segment. But this is someone who has spoken into my life and given me context on things that in the short term at 33 years old versus, Stan, how old are you? I don't think I've ever asked you.
I am 76.
So 33 and 76, and his perspective on things being much further along in life and being able to look back at 33 and go, hey, here's a different thought process on this. So whatever you're doing, stop, stand up, and give this man a round of applause. Welcome to Untitled, Stan. Good to have you here. And been looking forward to this for a while. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this too, Zach, because this is a whole new ball game for me. I've never done anything like this before, and I think that's what makes it so cool that we're hanging out together, because you're of a much younger generation than I am. And back when I was your age, we had no idea what a podcast was. A lot of people didn't even know what the internet was. So this is a real experience. I'm looking forward to whatever happens. And it's for sure we don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to kind of kick it around and compare notes and just kind of talk about different subjects.
Yeah. So when you grew up, was that like the Johnny Carson era?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember Johnny?
Oh yeah.
This is, we're like doing our little own Johnny Carson thing here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one of us is Johnny yet, but
well, I'm gonna let you be Johnny for now, because Johnny's the one that was always asking the questions and trying to get a good punchline, So I'm just gonna sit over here and relax, and we're gonna pick a subject and or some things to talk about. But I do appreciate being on here today with you, Zach. I really have a desire to learn more about how things get online, how people view things. Because, like I said, I'm one of the old guys. We didn't have this back in the Stone Ages.
Totally get you. So to give a little context about what I was saying earlier with Stan and I having a lot in common, I know when we sat down for the first time, what was really interesting is Stan was asking me a little bit about my business and what I do. And I kind of laid out this idea of the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how all of these three areas of our life, we have what goes on in our head, we have what goes on in our body, and then there's something metaphysical the spiritual aspect of life. And it was weird to see the look on Stan's face at first, because then you were like, you pulled out your piece of paper and you had soul, spirit, and body, and that was like a driving thing for you. And I don't know if I remember, but like, how did you come up to that place of soul, spirit, body, as like areas of your life that you need to get organized?
Well, the way it really started with me is I was fortunate. I've sat under some very good spiritual teachers in my lifetime, and a point that was always stressed by most of them in the Word of Faith ministry and just the full gospel ministries was that we are a spirit, we have a soul, and we live in a body. And that just kind of intrigued me, because this is many years ago, I had never heard that I'm a three-part person. And so I'm thinking, well, how do all these three parts fit together? And that's what got me doing some reading and just pulling different documentation off the internet, just trying to figure it out. And of course, going to God's Word and see what it had to say. So it's just something that's intrigued me. I'm still learning, but I do know now that I am a spiritual being. I have a mind, I have thought patterns, I have emotions, but I still live in this body, and this body is what carries all that around. So trying to hook them all together and just really have a clear picture as to what my lifestyle is going to look like if I'm led by God's Holy Spirit. So I don't know, man. It's just something that really created an interest in me, and I'm still pursuing it.
I get you there. It doesn't really seem like you ever reach a conclusion or an end in life. You just kind of keep going until, well, I guess the lights turn out. But I'm hoping that is not for a very long time, at least with you, because we just kind of started this whole thing, and I'm hoping that we get to spend some more time together over the next few years, because it's meant a lot to me to just get to know you. And I'm excited that everyone now gets to meet you and hopefully learn something, because I know that every single time that we sit down and talk, it doesn't matter if we're talking about cars or paint. Like, I think we sat down one time at coffee and we were talking about literally like batteries and paint and just like being curious about things. And I think that was something that we really connected on, was just like staying curious, keeping your mind fresh, trying to learn stuff. And I know that's been big for you. Has there been anything that you've been diving into lately, that watching videos or reading about anything in particular that someone might find weird? I know when we were talking about it, learning about paint and batteries, that turned into like an hour-long conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a little bit of history on my background. My father started taking me and my brother and I to car shows, antique and classic car shows, when we were about 8 and 9 years old. And so I've always grown up around what I perceive as very cool cars, old classics, hot rods, old motorcycles. So most people in my generation would just call me a gearhead, because whatever's out there. I did some racing ministry for a while as a chaplain for NHRA drag racing, and people would always ask me, "Well, what's your favorite kind of racing?" and that, and I'd say, "Hey, man, whatever makes a lot of noise and goes fast, I'm into it. I don't care if it's a car, a motorcycle, a speedboat. It doesn't matter to me." So when we started talking about cars that one day, I said, "Hey, this is cool, man. Zach, he keeps up on a lot of the exotic cars and all of the latest technology. And I'm the old time hot rodder guy that likes to take a 32 Ford and see what kind of big motor you can put in and see how fast it'll run. So we're on the same thought pattern, but we just got different car technologies. I mean, the things that I was involved with back when I was a teenager and cruising the streets of my neighborhood are so obsolete now compared to what this younger generation has, to where now all of their fuel systems, air intake, shift patterns, everything they do is just totally electronic. So they hook up their laptop, set it inside the interior of their car, and they start punching buttons, and that's what makes it go. So it's very interesting. But anybody that ever wants to talk about cars or going fast and doing crazy stuff, I'm the guy to talk to.
All right, so that makes me think of two questions. One that's probably going to get you in trouble, and one that I'm just kind of curious about. So we'll start with the curious one. What is your dream car? Like, being that you've been around cars your entire life, it could be from any generation, but if you could have any car right now, perfect mint condition, what would it be?
For me, in the street ride category, which is taking an old, like let's just say something in the 30s. One of my favorite body styles would be a 32 Ford 5-window coupe, and having a big V8 Chevy engine in it, probably a six-speed transmission. Just drop down, right? What they call in the hot rod industry is you put it in the weeds. In other words, you lower it so low. That's my.
Are those the ones with the big fat back tires?
Oh yeah, big tires on the back, little tires on the front. It's got to be, for me, it's got to be black, because black is. If you've got a black car with no blemishes on it, it's just impossible to beat. So that would be a favorite little cruising machine for me. Getting up into some of the later stuff, I mean, if I had my choice of anything, it might be a nice big Beamer or Mercedes, like a 2-door sedan or something to play with. But
yeah.
So anyway, that's actually it's kind of like with my racing and the drag racing experiences I've had. I'm not really set on one design, because I know a lot of times when I'll be watching one of the car auctions on TV, and Terry will say something about, man, how you just stay glued to that. I mean, what's so fascinating about it? And I'll tell her, I say, when those cars, those classics and antique cars go across that auction line, it's just like me watching artwork. And that's where I'm at. I mean, I just look at these old beautiful classics as a piece of art, because it's something you don't see that often anymore. So anyway, I don't know. I just, like I said, I'm a gearhead from way back, and I'm going to die a gearhead. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, the one that might get you in trouble.
Okay.
I guess part of the question would be like, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done in a car? But I guess, what is the fastest you've ever been in a car?
Well, I've been over 150 miles an hour, probably up around 160. The day that a friend of mine, we were down in Atlanta, Georgia, and we went to the Atlanta Speedway, and they had the Richard Petty driving school. And we went through that and actually got to drive a real, very real, authentic NASCAR stock car on the Atlanta Motor Speedway, which at that time was a 1.5-mile track. They keep changing these things. I'm not sure what it is now, but it was a 1.5-mile track. And so you had an instructor that you would follow around, and he'd show you what line to take and how to go into the corners and that. But then when it came your turn to race, there'd be like 3 cars out on the track, and the instructor would be leading. And if you were paying attention and doing what they taught you to do in the class, they'd let you run as fast as you wanted to go. And so my average speed on that was 148 miles an hour.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm sure going down the straightaways, it was up around, 150 or 160. But it was an awesome experience. And like the instructor said, he said, hey, the big boys, they go around this track at 200 miles an hour, and I'm sure nobody here is going to do that. So just keep your foot in it and be careful. And they just turn you loose, and it was awesome. It was a great experience.
That sounds.
Yeah.
I've seen some of those things where it's like you can go drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or something around a track, and it looks awesome. But I don't trust myself. I know I'd do something dumb. Megan would say, if you get life insurance, you can go for it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But overall, these like conversations that we've had, stuff like this continues to come up where it's just we talk about things, and you're like, man, I've got stories for everything. And you're very humble about it. And while that is awesome, I am curious. Somebody your age has lived through quite a lot, like culturally, societally, and just to see like how much things have changed, like, the way you grew up to the way we're growing up now. And I'm just kind of curious, what does someone like you think it progresses to? Like, did you ever see it getting to where it is now, and like now seeing where we are compared to where things were, 60 years ago when you were a teenager? Like, what is that like for you? What do you see moving forward, like with everything?
Yeah, I actually feel that I grew up in the perfect time as far as family life, as far as growing up as a kid, becoming a teenager, and then from there going into the service, into the Army was my branch. And but what I really recall is, and I think about this quite often now, because I see the world is changing so fast. I mean, every day something's coming out that changes what was new yesterday. Where back when I grew up, I was born in 1947, of course, which makes me 76 years old. And I remember I'm very aware of even in the late 50s, just being a kid, like in grade school and getting ready for junior high, and then graduating from high school in 1964, things like that, uh, things were so, I don't know, it just seemed like the family was tighter back then. We did a lot together. And I can see over time how that has just progressed, even with my own children, and how, you hear this all the time. This is not, this is nothing new, but just since I'm recalling it, I mean, like we played in the street all day, all night, until mom said it's time for dinner, until it got dark outside. And people today, the kids today, and even the parents, and I don't blame them for this, but there's no way they're going to let their children play out in the neighborhood and just roam up and down the city blocks without them knowing exactly where they're at. And I get that because of the way society has changed.
Oh yeah.
But I feel so fortunate that I was brought up in that, that I'm a baby boomer. When all the guys came back from World War II, man, they started making babies as fast as possible, and and I'm one of those.
Yeah, I had to repopulate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
what's weird though, Stan? Like, I feel more connected to your generation than I even do like Gen Z, and the reason it is I didn't grow up much different than you. We played outside all the time, and the street lights were the indicator for us as well. But I think really it's like, everything was kind of moving at a reasonable clip, it seemed like, as far as how our society was progressing, until we hit like the mid 2000s. And then when everyone started getting internet in their house and there was so much technology available, and then it just started skyrocketing. And like, I grew up without a cell phone for most of my life. Sorry, I take that back. Mm-hmm. I grew up without like smartphones. You just had like flip phones to get in contact, send text messages. But people who have, I say this to Megan sometimes, like people who have grown up with smartphones their entire lives, I feel so disconnected from them. And I don't know. I hate to be like that get off my lawn person, or like things were better back then, but there's definitely been I know there's family breakdown, but like cultural and societal breakdown, and just how much things have changed since all this technology has just been crazy. And I'm just always curious, like for people like you who, you've seen crazy changes as far as everything. I, I don't know. Do you have hope for us?
Oh yeah, I always have hope for everybody, because I know there was hope for me. I mean, I've been through some low parts of my life. I've spent just let's just say an up and down the ladder with my faith walk versus my being a just completely drunk alcoholic, up and down that ladder. And so, yeah, I've seen a lot of changes, and it wasn't until I, really came into reality that I said, man, I've got to stop this, what I'm doing. And, but so when I look back in my past, it all started when I was in my teenage years. I thought my mom and dad, had a great Christian home and loving parents, but I just had that draw to kind of break away and do my own thing. And I found out that it caused me a lot of issues, negative issues in my life. And so when I look at kids today, there's so much advancement in technology and learning and things about the worldly culture that it's so much easier for them to start at an earlier age and getting involved with a lot of things that are actually hurting them. And I'm talking about just the peer pressure of just things that have to do with sexuality, things that have to do with drinking and drug use. And today, it almost seems like it's normal for children to go through that, and I don't like that, because with me personally, I have found a better way of life, and I'm really happy. I have found some freedom, and I've certainly got victory over my past. So that's my prayer for our young people today, because they're so exposed to everything. I mean, it still blows my mind how just about on occasion, I'll just see kids that are, 5 and 6 years old, and they've got their smartphone with them, and it's the same phone that I'm using, and I can find anything I want to see or anything I want to hear on my smartphone.
Good or bad.
Yeah. At my age, and I'm just thinking, man, what kind of pictures are these kids sending back and forth and all that? And we all know, I mean, this is nothing new to society or anybody that's hearing this now, but it's still just, it bothers me. I'm not, well, I am sure what the answer is, but I'm not sure how to present that answer to young people in a way that they'll understand it. And that answer to me is the faith I have found in God through Christ Jesus, his son. And so to me, this is a evolving thing that I'm into now, because my desire now is to blank out my past and to be who I am in Christ, so that I can go into the future, and hopefully something I say or something I do will help a younger person, a person in their teenage years or in their college years. So anyway, I mean, there's just so much that's changed. It's hard to really pinpoint just a few things, but it seems to me, and there again, I'm the old guy here, but it just seems to me that it's a whole lot easier for children today to get involved with things that are going to have a negative effect on the rest of their life.
Yeah. I mean, access is great. Like, it's really cool that we do have it. And I'm very thankful that I do live in the time that I'm in. Like, we are very blessed, especially living in America. But there's just, and I know that we've talked about this, but our culture, our society, and I hate to be this guy who's like, we have a culture problem. It's our society. But in all reality, it is. And it comes from like a lack of openness, a lack of communication, a lack of vulnerability, and everyone feeling like, and honestly, I feel like it's changed a lot since social media has been out, because there's almost like this spotlight effect where everyone thinks they're important now. And so everyone posts all this stuff on. I mean, look, I'm doing a podcast. Like, who am I to be doing a podcast? And that's why it's taken me so long to even start this thing, is because I'm just another person. Like, I've got some crazy stuff that I've been through already in the short 33 years. But the whole thing is I'm just trying to figure this out, and I'm trying to share with people as I'm figuring it out, like what it is. And I'm trying to teach people how I've been trying to figure it out. Cause like, in all reality, I still suck at a lot of things. Like, I lost a lot of weight. I still struggle with eating. Me and my wife are constantly trying to get our marriage in a better place. And like, if I were to sit here and be like, yeah, our marriage is going great, I'd be lying. Like, we still have problems. We still have to work through things. And the difference is that we are trying to work through those things because we want it to work. And it's not just for the kids. It's not just because we fall into line with a Christian faith and like, divorce. God hates divorce. Yeah. God also hates when we tell lies. God also hates when we overeat, but we like to pick and choose what we pretend is like more important than others. And all that does is, like you're saying, like the whole thing is you have this thing on your heart of like, if people just gave themselves over to Jesus, they would find so much more freedom. And it's something I personally continue to struggle with. It's like, I've given myself over to it, but I still fight against it all the time because I don't really want to do that. Like like when I'm stressed out, I'd much rather just smoke pot than like spend time in prayer and like try to relax. But I'm working on it.
Yep.
I'm working on it all the time because I know it's not something like the world's always going to offer me, and the culture and the society is always going to offer me a cheap, easy way to solve my problems. But I'm not going to learn anything. And I know that from talking to people like you, what I've learned is better ways of handling those things. I think one of the first things I've asked you that meant a lot, the way that you answered it, was when we were talking, and you were talking about getting sober. And I asked you, what was the difference between, because here's the thing, if you're an addict, you've quit more times than you can count. And I know that from personal experience. Like the amount of times that I've quit smoking, it's stupid. It's like I quit smoking when I wake up, and then by the end of the day, it's, it happens like at different times in my life. But like I asked you that question of, well, what was the difference in the last time? Because you had been drinking for, how long? How long were you struggling with that?
Yeah, I was off and on, more on for probably 35 years of my life. And I got to the point where I was getting up and having a vodka tonic for breakfast before I went to work. And that's when you're really doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an issue with me, and it was something that I just wasn't able to break on my own. And that's when I started reaching out. There has to be a way that God will provide for me to find some freedom from this addictive behavior that I was really in bad shape. And it's kind of like a friend of mine who taught me a lot about addiction. He told me, he said, most people wait until they come to the end of themselves and the end of their resources. And that's where I was at.
Yeah.
When I made the final decision, because I was spent out, and my resources were gone, and so I had to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I looked up into heaven. And I said, "Okay, God, I'm ready." I've been running from God off and on for all those 35 years of nonstop drinking, and so at that point, it was a decision that I made. There was nothing supernatural about it. It wasn't like a spiritual experience. It was just something that I came to the conclusion that if I don't stop this, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to make a lot of people upset and disappointed. So
Yeah. Yeah. Addiction sucks because the whole time that you're struggling through it, at least, sorry, let me make this personal. The whole time that I struggle through it and continue to struggle through it, because you're always battling it. Your brain always remembers that pathway. And I think the thing that bothers me the most is how disappointed and how ashamed I am when I start to struggle with it, or when I'm going through it, because I know it's not what I should be doing. And I know there's something better, but like, it's really hard. It's really hard to put it down and be like, okay, I'm going to choose the hard path. I don't know how to say it other than that. Like, it's not always drugs and alcohol. Like, I
Sure.
think a huge amount of people are addicted to so many things that are culturally approved, but it's fine because the culture's fine with it, or the church is fine with it, or whatever. And it's like, no one cares about the guy who's 400 pounds as long as he's at church serving.
yeah, right.
But it's like, that guy's addicted to food.
Yeah.
That guy's got issues, because that was me. And like, addiction comes in all shapes and sizes, but
Very true.
if you're struggling with it, you more than likely know that it's something you should be doing something about or changing, but more than likely you feel powerless to change it. And it continues to rope you back in.
Yeah. That's the thing about my issues that I had in the past, is that I'm very thankful and very appreciative that at this point in my life, I have no desire for alcohol or any other kind of substance that I was taking to
That's awesome.
to kind of get myself away from reality. So I'm very fortunate. It didn't happen overnight, but what I did is I started pursuing what is it going to take to stop putting the flesh first in my life.
Mm.
And that's when the spirit, soul, and body concept, not just a concept, it's a reality, but it came into my life, and thinking, I got to looking at it, and I said to myself, the only way that I'm going to totally be set free is to allow my spirit man, which has been recreated because of Christ Jesus and what he did, dying for my sins on the cross. And I accepted that. And when I did, it made me a new person on the inside, and God's spirit came within me. And so for that reason, after reading back and forth and looking at things, it dawned on me like, duh, the only way I'm going to be set free from this flesh that desires alcohol every day is to be led by God's Holy Spirit. Because I know God's Spirit, which is within me, did not create me to be a drunk. And that's just where I came from. And so I started building on that. And fortunately, God's word is true. And I took the scripture that deal with spirit, mind, spirit, soul, and body. I took it for real. I believed it. And I started acting it out in my life. And I'm still acting it out. I mean, there's nothing to say that someday there might be created a situation where my flesh goes, you know what you do? You need a good Jack and Coke right now, you know?
Yeah.
But when that does happen, I believe that because of my faith walk, how it's been developed, is that I'll be able to resist that because of what's been going on in my spirit man.
Mm.
So my whole key right now with my life is not to be led by my mind, which has a lot of crazy thoughts in it. There's sometimes a lot of chaos up in my head, in my thought life, but to be led by that Spirit of God that says, when I think about alcohol abuse or think about getting back into drinking or just because, I mean, let's face it, I've tried to prove to myself, not exaggerating, probably hundreds of times, that I'm a social drinker.
Mm.
That's not me. Some people can do that.
Yeah. I mean,
and
for me, it was always,
yeah.
like with weed, it was always, well, I have depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
So I'm using it as medication,
Yeah.
but it's like, I didn't need to smoke 4 bong loads for medication.
Yeah, right.
Like I didn't need to do that. And like, it was, for me, it's always just been a crutch. Like,
Yeah.
I can't have fun without it. I can't do this without it. I can't do that without it. And when you finally get yourself, because this is something that like, it's cyclical where, like you said, I don't have the desire or I don't have the thought or that person in the back of your head that goes, man, I could go for a Jack and Coke. It's like that person speaks very loud to me sometimes, very loud, where it's like that is the person driving. And when I'm weak, when I'm not doing well, when me and Megan are not in a good place, when I'm not in a good place with my eating, that person starts to sound a lot more reasonable. And that sucks.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's a tug of war between the spirit man and the soulish man, or the soul, which includes the mind and our emotions and our feelings. It's a constant tug of war. And your body is going to react to whoever wins that tug of war contest.
Yeah.
So if you're pulled by your thoughts and your desires to go out and get high or have a few drinks, which I've proven to myself, I can't do a couple of drinks. I don't do that. And so if I allow myself to follow my thought patterns or my fleshly desire, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be pulled back into a drinking situation. And that would be very, oh man, I can only imagine it would just be very ugly for me, especially for my wife and my children who have seen me come through this. So there's just a lot of things that tie together that make me say to myself, I will not and I do not do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel everything on, like that you said, on just such a deep level, because I know for me personally, the challenge is really because it's been a part of my life for such a long time and I've relied on it for such a long time, to finally give that over to something else. And then that something I'm deciding to give that over to is God, which is like an impossible concept to understand. And that's why faith is what it is. And like when we first started sitting down and talking, that was one of my biggest struggles, was like the concept of God. And I think for probably the first 2 months that we sat down and talked together, I was just really wrestling with like, I've believed this my whole life and now I'm questioning it. And I don't have answers, and I don't like that. And because when you are someone who struggles with dependency, whether it be on people or chemicals or alcohol or whatever it is, it's like you need something firm to cling to almost. It's like you need to replace the addiction in a way, which is not healthy necessarily. But I know that you have you've helped me come to a place on this, like understand how to accept certain parts of the faith, looking at it from the bird's eye view of where you're at. And what's impressive to me is how many times I've questioned you on things, and I have like brought stuff up that is super complicated and terrible sounding, like the darkest things that you can imagine, and trying to reconcile all of those things with God. And you didn't they didn't seem to shake you at all. Like, in all honesty, that your resolution in that, it was impressive, because I'm over here like, damn, I like one little thing, like a pebble on the road shakes me up. And
Yeah.
I'm over here like, so how do you justify? And I just lay out this horrible situation, and you're like, dude, gotta have faith.
You gotta have it. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? So often, my answers, to some people, it just sounds like a cop out answer. It's like, well, I'll just say anything. Just
I thought that at first with you, man.
Just to move on. But really, I'm just a simple guy, man. I mean, I've got a little bit of education, and I've got a few things going for me as far as situations I've been in life. But I just try to keep it simple, man. And I tell everybody, I say, hey, here's my thing. Just live ready and keep it real. And that's my outlook on everything. I mean, just live ready. If somebody throws something up in your face, it's controversial, or you can't, you don't have an answer for it, I'm not going to get in a spitting contest with anybody.
Yeah.
I'll just tell them up front. I'll say, hey, you know what? That's something that's beyond my thought pattern, my expertise, and so we'll just move on. I mean, and so now there's been a time in my life where years ago, when I was drinking and drugging and getting all hopped up and stuff, I certainly did not have this kind of peace within myself. In fact, it was just the opposite. The more I drank, the more I was angry. And it wasn't like I was angry with other people. I understand that now. I was actually angry with myself, and it was being released on other people.
Can we pause there for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So you're angry with yourself, and I don't think I've ever heard you say that. And I'm curious about this, because you seem very comfortable with who you are now. So like, how do you come to grips with that, like, concept of forgiving yourself? Like, how did you forgive yourself in a way that you're able to sit here and be comfortable with all the crap that you've done? And I don't mean that like, Dan, you've done a lot of crap, but like, I know I've done a lot of crap, and it's hard. And I take the way that I feel about myself and I project that onto the closest people around me. And it sucks. And I don't like doing it. Like, I'm trying, but I haven't really quite figured it out. So that's something I've always struggled with, like forgiving myself. But you seem very comfortable with it, and I've never asked you that question. So like, how did you forgive yourself?
Well, my thing about when I really got into serious, heavy duty, alcoholic type drinking, was that I also had a lot of faith teaching, a lot of teaching about, God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the power of the Holy Spirit. And I had these two things that I was involved with off and on, like I said earlier, I've been up and down the spiritual ladder so many times that it's like crazy. But the thing is, I had this battle going on in between myself as to every time I was drinking excessively and getting all lit up with whatever I was doing, I always had that sense inside of me, that check in my spirit that, man, that's not right. That's not right. That's not the way you were brought up. That's not really what your faith is in. But I would go ahead and I would do it anyway. And so that's why I was saying I had to come to that point where I released myself from that battle that was within. And I had to say, I'm going one way or the other because this back and forth stuff is wearing me out. It actually caused me 2 marriages. Fortunately, now I'm married to a person that is just absolutely perfect for me.
I don't think you could get out of that marriage if you wanted to.
Yeah, Terry.
You're stuck.
Terry and I, man. I mean, it's like we're hooked up forever, and we just everything about it. And because of that, and because of 20 years now without any alcohol in my system, I've got my family back, my kids back, and things like that. So that's why
20 years this year?
Well, I actually started on my road to recovery in the year 2000.
So 23 years.
Yeah. So in the first year or so, there was a few bumps in the road. You know, I'd go back and I'd have a little drinking spell, but nothing that carried over and made a life. It wasn't a lifestyle. But it was through gradually understanding who I am and what I needed to find freedom and get my victory back in life is how I've progressively got to where I am now. And so that's why I say 20 years, because it's been at least that long since I've not had a desire for alcohol and or any kind of substance abuse at all. So but when I do look back on it and the forgiving of myself, that's always been an issue.
Yeah.
And even today, I'll have flashbacks about things that I was never abusive to the mother of my children. I was never abusive to my children as far as anything physical or any kind of bad. You know, I thought I was a good father. My thing is that I was just too involved in alcohol and they picked that up. So when I look back on my life now, I can forgive myself of what I did because I know what state of mind I was in then when I was doing it. I'm in a totally different state of mind right now. But what really caused the difference is this: is that all I can do, I went back to those people and I made amends to them. And they all know that I'm moving in a new direction now. And they have been seeing that in the last 20, 23 years. And so.
Can we pause here for a second real quick? How long did it start taking for those people that you, I guess, asked for forgiveness? Because that's a whole nother thing. Like, this is a concept that I've really struggled with. And then I'm going to get to my question is that idea of like being forgiven by God and like how that actually works, because religion kind of makes you feel like you're always still trapped in your sin. And religion is what is like kept me away from Christianity for such a long time, is because of religious Christians rather than like people who, because I saw people in the church and I was like, I don't want to be anything like those people. But like this idea that you just brought up, I don't want to move off of, because I don't know that I really do struggle with this. Like I screw up and I will just be like, dude, that was so dumb. And I will want to ask for forgiveness from those people, but I'm like afraid to tell them, or like what they may not necessarily forgive me immediately. So like you do something and you're aware that like what your problems were, what your sin was, caused pain in the relationships. But like, how long was it that you were staying clean and sober before those people actually like acknowledged your change was real and not just this thing? Because I know whether it's weight loss or any of these things, and you've tried to do it multiple times or quit drinking or quit smoking or whatever it is, there's almost like so many people that have seen you quit or try to lose weight or do all these things so many times that they don't believe it's real. So like when did that kind of actually click that it's like, I think Stan's for real. I don't think this is a crock of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had every reason to believe that because I had tried to quit on my own. And what I mean by on my own is just say no. You heard just say no. Well, that's a terrible statement because you cannot just say no and everything's going to be beautiful. With me is when I came into the reality of how much God loves me, and he loved me enough to send his own son to die for me, to forgive me of my sins. When I came into that reality, that's what made the difference.
And then what about with people though, like seeing that, like obviously drinking might have hurt some relationships that you had. So like how long was it before people actually realized it was legit?
Right. So I'm saying that by the time I was 2 years in to my recovery, and this all happened at a church that I was attending at that time, they had a aftercare recovery group. And I started going that group, and the people around me, especially my kids, they started seeing that, hey, Dad's being consistent about this time. There's something different. He's just not going to a meeting to appease us and to make us think that he's actually wanting to not drink anymore. So by doing that on a consistent basis, and then changing my lifestyle to where when I told people I was going to show up at a certain time, I actually did show up to one of my children's baseball games or one of the grandkids to their baseball games, things like that. So just these little baby steps, they started realizing that, maybe this is the time he's for real. And then what really helped, and this was just a God thing that back in the year 2006, my wife now, Terry, and I, we met at St. Louis Family Church where we were both attending. She had just went through a horrible divorce. And I was single at the time. And to make a long story short, we became attracted to each other, went out and had some coffee and, your regular stuff, a little dinner date and go to the movies and things like that. And she came into my life, and my children, I'm sure, had never saw me be as affectionate and loving and kind, and the main thing, happy with anybody in my entire life.
How long into the process of like starting that kind of relationship with Terry did it take for you to tell her about everything? Like to tell her about your struggles with alcohol, to tell her about your 2 divorces, to tell her about, just like because I really do want to touch on this because Megan and I's marriage pretty much fell apart because we weren't open and honest with each other ahead of time in our marriage about stuff that we struggled with. And then those things that we struggled with manifested themselves. And because we weren't aware of those issues, we hid them from each other. Like we didn't want them to then find out then because it's like, oh, are they going to love me? So it's like, I'm curious, how long into that was it like you sit down and you're like, hey, so I'm Stan, I'm X amount of years sober, I'm doing my best, this is my life. Can you accept this?
Yeah, but a good question. And yeah, I've got it covered. Terry and I were actually aware of each other probably 2 years before we even had a dinner date, because like I said, she was going through a really bad, horrible divorce. And so and I was not looking for anybody. I was not looking for a relationship at that time in my life. But what happened is that we started dating, and the first thing we did is we started telling each other about our lives and our past. And she knew more about me within that first 6 months than probably anybody in my life has ever known. I mean,
Wow.
she knew everything. The guys I grew up with, the crazy stuff we did, got in trouble, things like that. And then she, of course, she told me about her past marriages. And so the bottom line is this: when we got to a point where we were really getting serious about each other, and we had a real passion for each other, a real love in our heart for each other, we both, and it just kind of came out of both of us at the same time, we said, you know what? We both know how to do marriage the wrong way.
Mm.
Now we're going to do this marriage the right way. And we started talking to our pastor at St. Louis Family Church, our assistant pastor, Pastor John Moore, who actually married us later on down the road. But anyway, it was a mutual agreement with both of us that, hey, this one is going to be a godly marriage. And even when we were dating, it was like, hands off sexually. Of course, there was passion involved and, the little, smoochy and all that kind of stuff. But we decided from the very beginning that when we get married is when we're going to consummate the marriage. And we were both we were so 100% totally online with all of our thoughts about this marriage. And it's just totally amazes me every day how this marriage works. And I tell my buddies, the guys that had seen me go through 2 marriages before that one, or before the one I'm on right now, and I just told them, I say, hey guys, I never knew marriage could be so much fun. And that was my most honest answer that I could give. I said, I'm actually having fun being married.
Wow.
And so that's kind of the short version of how that went. And we just actually, before we were married, Carrie was living with with a girlfriend of hers, and she only lived about 3 blocks away from where I was living. And she would actually come over on her way to work early in the morning on the weekdays. And we're talking like 6 o'clock, and come in, and we actually started doing devotionals together before we were actually married. And so it's just little steps like that just made the whole thing work.
Yeah.
And all the little baby steps came together. And when we did step out into marriage, it was like, hey, this is cool, man. This is a new beginning.
You two ever get in arguments or fights?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we fuss about things. But the thing is,
Like any bad ones, like knockout, drag out ones where you're like, ooh, this is a tough one to come back
it's
from.
usually just really stupid, petty stuff, because we've already been through the knockdown, drag out fights with other partners.
You got them all out of your system.
Yeah. So now it's like kind of like
now it's just over. Did you put the trash bag in?
Yeah. It's like no big deal, So, but there again, that all came with experience in the past, that in my past marriages were not good situations. And I did not want to create anything that was going to cause this one to be a bad situation. And so there again, being aware of my surroundings and being aware of how my chaotic head works at times, is when I say, hey, I've got to get this under control and step out and make this thing work. And I think that's what that's what happens with a lot of people when you give them a chance to see how they can be free from certain whatever the situation is, and then you tell them, but what it's going to take is you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that, you're going to have to watch what you say, you're going to have kind of then it's like, oh man, are you kidding me? I got to do all that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Megan and I were just talking about this the other day, that like I couldn't imagine trying to look for a spouse nowadays. Like we met in college. Very fortunate to have met in college, because now it seems like the only real place to meet people is either online or in places that aren't necessarily the best places, or church.
Yeah.
You can meet people at church. I genuinely think that the biggest mistake that Megan and I made was not going to premarital counseling. And that's not even a religious thing. It's a counseling thing. And I think that it was genuinely the biggest mistake that we made, because A, we barely knew ourselves. And B, because we barely knew ourselves, we couldn't really tell each other about who we were. Yeah. And that led to so many of the issues. Like when I met Megan, I wasn't struggling with depression and anxiety at the time, because she was like a drug in a way. Like there was something so new and so special about everything that it was better than drugs. Like it was better than anything that I had in my life. And it was euphoric in a way, that I was willing to overlook things and she was willing to overlook things. And had we just sat down and talked about like, hey, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I pretty much, use weed to cope with it, or whatever it is, or I use these things to cope with it. But like, I didn't know at the time. And so how am I going to tell her that? And like going to counseling and like learning a little bit about what your struggles are and sharing that, I feel like is so crucial, and why so many marriages struggle nowadays. And even ours, like when we're working on stuff, it's generally because we're struggling to be open and honest about what's going on, because either A, it's going to hurt the person that we're going to tell them, like hurt each other if we tell them this truth, or B, we're just not communicating properly. And counseling kind of teaches you that. But it sounds like you and Terry kind of started that process of, you talked to someone at the church, you got some stuff figured out, and you learned how to communicate ahead of time. But you had the difficult conversation of, I'm going to lay all my cards out on the table, and I'm willing to deal with whatever that outcome is, because it's not going to work if I don't.
True. Very true. Yeah, we were really straight up with each other, and so a lot of people go into relationships, and the first thing that happens, they get blindsided by something, and then it's like, man, it all breaks loose and gets chaotic. But so I'm very fortunate, very thankful that and I give God all the credit for bringing us together.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think this is a good place to stop on the first one, but we're going to definitely have to come back and do this again. Stan and I have been reading a book together called The Transform Life, and going through it. We're going through it slow and steady.
Yep.
We're not in a rush to get through it. But there's so many cool topics in there that we've read through and that we'll continue to go through. And hopefully we'll be able to, as we kind of talk about things and have conversations, stuff will come up about it here on this. But I think we should do this again. Definitely.
This has been great, Zach. Like I said, this is an intro to a new concept for me, and I really enjoyed it. And I thank you for putting all this together. I mean, there's no way I could hook all these wires up and these lights and
Dude, I don't even know if I did it right.
And make the sound come out. So, but anyway, thanks for the opportunity, and we'll catch you. We'll just catch up again soon.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you genuinely for your vulnerability, because that's what it's really about, is like you're sharing the worst parts, also some of the best parts, but you're sharing the worst parts about what's gone on. And that's not easy.
Yeah.
So I'm just, thank you for being open and not being like, hey, I'm going to just sugarcoat this.
Yeah, right.
Does nobody any favors. So
Right.
thank you. But
Okay.
so if you're still out there, you're still listening, I appreciate you staying here and stopping by. I just want to remind you that the whole purpose of living untitled is setting aside everything that you have on yourself. Titles aren't always positive things. Titles are sometimes negative things. And we put these titles over ourselves and we live in the bondage of those titles, whether it be CEO or whether it be alcoholic or whether it be, cheater or adult. Like we create these things. Like for me, addict. And if I live by that title, it's going to completely alter every decision that I make, everything that I do moving forward. And you have to be willing to set those titles down and step into a place like this and be vulnerable. And it doesn't have to be in public. Doesn't have to be on a podcast format, but you have to learn to live in a way and talk to people, because let me tell you, life will destroy you. It is undefeated. It has taken everyone down.
Yep.
And the best thing that you can do for yourself is learn how to fight back a little bit better. And that starts with laying things down and being vulnerable about it. And just beyond blessed to be sitting here with a man like Stan and be able to do this podcast. So thank you, everyone, if you are continuing to watch. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone. And you don't have to share it on social media. Just send it to a friend.
Yeah.
Tell them to fast forward to the 5 minutes that you think they'll enjoy. This is not for money. This is not for fame. This is not for anything other than to share with people what my life has looked like in multiple seasons and how I have not handled things well and how I have handled things well. And hopefully that will provide some help to people. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Woo. That was good. That was fun.